Hi everybody, how you all doing? My name is Sean and welcome to Lines in Wax, the place where we talk shit about music. You may have noticed last year I did a discography retrospective video on Mick Harris's Scorn. It was best part of 40 minutes long and contained a deep dive analysis of all of the blokes, outputs, the ins and outs of all his EPs and albums, and a little bit of history. I understand these videos are probably a bit too long for some people to watch, so as a companion piece, like I did for my Cradle of Filth video, where I did the album ranking as a companion piece, also wanted to go back and do a Scorn album ranking. So this contains mostly studio albums. There are one or two EPs in there, but for the most part, I have excluded 12-inch releases in regards to ones that just have a couple of tracks on them, or an A-side, B-side kind of electronic music output. I've excluded them for the simple reason that I don't want this to be a long video. I want to touch on the basis of the main releases and just rank those. So yeah, pull up a pew, grab yourself a drink, and let's rate Mick Harris's Scorn studio albums and a couple of EPs. In last place, and again, this is there's not really any bad albums here. It's not something I'm going to shit on any of these. But in last place, my least favourite studio-length album in number 16th place is Ellipsis. So this is the remix album that the Mick did in the mid-90s around, I think it was Gyral, and they had people coming in externally and submitting remixes of Scorn tracks. So that's why it's number 16. It's not truly Scorn. There's a lot of weird vibes here. I do like it. It's an interesting listen. I just don't find myself going back to it all that often. So, it's a nice idea and it's a nice project, but it stays firmly last place for me. In 15th place, I have Gyral, the album which those remixes was based off. Purely because it's the first album without Nick Bullen on vocals and bass, and it does feel a bit unsteady on its feet. It acts as a precursor to the minimalist direction that Scorn's music would take, but it's still kind of in the old style of Scorn music, like from Evanescence and Colossus in some regards. So for me, it's a weird kind of middle ground. Again, it's not bad. There are some amazing songs here. It spawned the single Stairway. It's a good album. It's really chilled out, but it does have that anxious undertone to it. Again, not a bad album. They're just, in my opinion, much better Scorn albums, so that's why it's further down the list. Number 14 is Xander. At this point, we're into the, really into like the heavy beats and bass kind of era of Scorn. It's just, there are so many better beats and bass Scorn albums, and that's not to shit on Xander at all. I think in my original review of it in the Scorn discography retrospective, I put it up there with like some of the Aphex Twin stuff, which I think may be a bit of an overblown statement, but it's still a really good album. It's really chilled, and there's some fucking phenomenal beats on here. It's just, for me, they're a better Scorn album, so it's down there at number 14. Again, no shade, it's just I prefer others. Number 13, I have a soft spot for this, even though it's quite repetitive, is Deliverance. So it's an EP from really early days when Scorn were doing like industrial metal mixed with dub. But it's so long that it doesn't really feel like an EP, and it really, despite not really being that good, as in it doesn't have standout tracks, the whole journey of Deliverance, delivered to heaven through high, it's got this whole journey through the tracks and the dubs, and the way the music is like pulled apart and folded back on itself really just impresses me, and I love Deliverance. So that's why it's in the list. But it's just, it can get a bit repetitive. That's why it's down low, even though it's part of the classic kind of industrial output. Number 12, we have List of Takers. Now, List of Takers, again, it's kind of a strange studio album output in that it's not really a new recording. These are versions and different, beats and stuff culled from different sessions, all played together as if they were a DJ set. So what you get with List of Takers is a 1 hour journey. One single track, 1 hour. Just let it take you on that journey. It's just, it doesn't offer anything particularly new or groundbreaking, and that's why it's a little bit further down the list. But still, it's really good. It's number 12 out of 16, and it's a really good listen, especially if you just want to chill out and throw some beats on. You don't have to think about it. Chuck this whole set on in one go. Enjoy it. Number 11 is The Only Place, and this is one that I wasn't included in my discography video because I did that video before Scorn released this album in 2021. Bit of a strange mixed vibe going on here. I mean, the artwork is just really strange. You've got like that, like the inverted crosses, and you've got like the Scorn font. It looks like, is it Void? It looks like that old kind of hardcore font, and then you've got like sun shining on a what is that, a dandelion or a daff, you know what I'm saying? But I'm fucking useless when it comes to plants. But yeah, I mean, it's really oppressive, it's really like heavy, and it's really atmospheric and bass heavy, and the beats are a little bit dialed back compared to some of the stuff that we love. But my problem with The Only Place, and the reason it's lower in the list, is that it's a bit repetitive, which is a shame. Doesn't really break new ground, and again, it's not to throw shade. It is a great album. It's just not pushing the Scorn sound forward in any way. In number 10, just above that, and in a similar boat, but not as derivative, dare I say it, is Cafe More. It's the one that came out a few years ago, and this one hits a little harder for me. It's still oppressive, it's still dark and ominous, but it definitely has more of a thump to it, more, I think urgency is probably the wrong word, but it definitely has a little bit more going on, and I really enjoyed Cafe More. Whether or not it's because I was starved for Scorn at this point, and the return of the project was just like, made this album golden in my eyes. But, yeah, Cafe More is much better in my opinion than The Only Place that followed it. Number 9, we have the classic and probably the most famous Scorn album, and that's Evanescence, back when the band were a two-piece, when they were doing their ambient style music. Again, it's dreamy, it's washed out and strange, and it's got all sorts of interesting vibes. It's got some fantastic beats, some really good songs. Days Past, Automata, stuff like that are just incredible. It sounds amazing. It sounds huge on vinyl as well. It's also quite poppy in its own regard. But yeah, it's a classic, and that's why it's here, about midway in the list. It's a classic. It's not my favourite, but it's also nowhere near my least favourite either. So there it sits in the middle. In number 8 is the off-kilter Logie Borogie, which is quite possibly the most stripped back in regards to the approach, rather than the actual sound. And this is just beats, big beats in your face, blowing your fucking dick off. This is like super heavy, super intense beats, really like, no holds barred electronics. It's just like repetitive, it can be a bit of a slog to get through, but if you're in it, you're in it, and it really isn't anything like it. I'm sure there's music like it. That's not what I mean, but it's really like, it really hits the spot. If you feel like listening to Logie Borogie, only Logie Borogie will do. And in a similar vein, the album that's next is number 7 on my list of favorite Scorn albums is Refuse Start Fires. There's a kind of similar grit to it as Logie Borogie, but it's got real drumming on some of the tracks, and it's got that really dark kind of like, I don't know, mechanical kind of ambience to it, like it had the band, Scorn has on Gravel Bed and EPs like that I've not mentioned in this list. That is realised fully here in Refuse Start Fires as a full length, and it's a dark trip. Again, sounds absolutely enormous on a double 12-inch pressing, and it really just hits you in the face with some disgusting electronic music, with some lovely real drumming in there as well. Phenomenal. One of my favourite later Scorn albums, Refuse Start Fires, just coloured a little bit different as well. And we're going all the way back to the beginning now for number 6 with White Iris is Blind. Again, it's an EP, but it was re-released as an extended, almost album length, if not longer than an album length, by Uric Records. It has a whole bunch of remixes of some of my favourite Scorn tracks, so getting that alternative take on some of my favourites, as well as hearing some fucking great, like, really stripped back dub stuff. White Iris is Blind is one of my favourite songs ever, so this is up there. It's not quite at the top, but it's got to be, everything from this point is just flawless, like absolutely flawless, and it's really hard to rank, especially with the different eras of the band. But yeah, White Iris is Blind. That entire CD is just incredible to me. The one downside, I don't like really the Sabres of Paradise remixes that were on the extended version of the White Iris Blind release. Not my favorite, but the rest of that stuff is incredible, and that's why it's so high up the list. At number 5 is Scorn's second full-length album, Colossus, and this is where their dub really takes a turn into the dark and disturbing claustrophobic world that they conjure up. And you get, again, Mick is on drums here, really slow, sludgy, heavy drums, and they're treated and warped, and Nick Bullen's vocals are just like washed out and just like, what is going on? It's so paranoid and weird and dense, and you get these like slabs of ambient noise as well as tracks, and it's just so oppressive. There really isn't much in the world that I've found so far, at least, and I've plumbed some dark corners of the musical world, and there's not much out there like Colossus. I'd love to hear more music like Colossus. It's really unique. I love this album. It's just an intense listen, and I love every single thing about it. I wish they kind of lingered in this kind of, style a bit longer, but the band was changing so rapidly in the early 90s that it's no surprise they didn't do more than one record in this style. But yeah, Colossus, one of my favorite records of all time, can't fault it. Number 4, this is moving back to the mid-career Scorn, is Plan B. It's one of the records I think they did on Hyman, and it's just an absolute belter. It's just beats and bass and boom, it is like blow you off your chair. Fucking incredible electronic music. I cannot really fault this, nor can I really expand on what I've just said. It just has to be heard. It really is just like unrelenting, it doesn't fuck around. It gets in, it drops these like amazing songs, these fucking amazing bass and amazing program drums and atmospherics, and then it's done. It's like, as I said in my discography review, whatever Plan A was, I don't want to know. Plan B is where is that? In a similar vein, in the year 2000, though, in at number 3 is Greetings from Birmingham. This thing goes hard. This goes hard as fuck. It's like intense drums programming and just like this gut wobbling bass. It is just, it's an incredible dingy kind of underworld electronic album, and it just does not fuck around. It comes in, it gives you some wicked beats, some amazing bass. The production is incredible. Honestly, I'm just rehashing the same words over and over again, but it is what it is. Greetings in Birmingham, an incredibly heavy electronic music album. Cannot recommend it enough, but there are better albums, and that's why it's only at number 3. At number 2, we are Whiplash, all the way back to the start, the first ever Scorn album, Ve Solis, or Ve Solace, not entirely sure how you say it, but it's, this is where they Scorn bolted out the gate, as it were. You've got bare bones, industrial metal, it's kind of sludgy, it's kind of got Godflesh vibes, and that's no coincidence. You've got Justin Broderick on guitar, that wailing guitar, that heavy crunch. It's the lineup of the A side of Scum from Napalm Death, now doing something drastically slower and heavier. The best thing about Ve Solis, though, is like when the second half, the metal kind of falls away and the weird, trippy electronic dub stuff kind of takes over. And it's almost, as I said in the discography video, and I implore you to watch it if you've enjoyed this retrospective of the ranking. Rather, I implore you to go watch that other video. As I said there, it's like 2 albums stapled together, but it's not like a remix of the first half. It just descends into this oral stripping away of meat from the bone, and it is one of the most interesting albums I've ever heard, and it's kind of stuck with me. For something I bought randomly off the Uric website when I was a teenager, I had in my possession for years as like it kind of sounds like Godflesh, so I'm not really going to bother with it. After listening to the first couple of songs, really didn't do it a service. And one day I listened to it all the way through. I think I was working as a painter when I was a teenager, and I took it to a house with me, and it was the only CD I had, and I fucking played it through like 3 or 4 times in a day, and I was just like completely in love with this. And I was like, why have I never listened to this thing all the way through before? It's absolutely fucking incredible. It's such a strange, unsettling, weird vibe, and I can't really sell it. You know, you have to hear it for yourself and decide for yourself. And yeah, they sold this. I almost put this number 1, but I didn't want to like overshadow like what Scorn is, you know, as at its core and what it has been for 20 years or so. So at number 1 is my favorite non-dubby Scorn album. It's Stealth. It is the absolute blinder. It is the most brutal of the electronic output. It's kind of proto dubstep in a way, you know, before dubstep became like bro step and like whoop, 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 all that shit, you know. It's absolutely just snaps your fucking neck. The drum programming is just insane. The snares, like, you feel like your head's blowing off every time a snare hits. The bass is just enormous and fat. The bass, like LFOs or whatever is going on with those frequencies and the sounds and he's manipulating, it's just savage as fuck. And to me, Stealth is the perfect example of what Scorn is about. And for me, what Scorn's about is beats, bass, and just dread. The longer the note, the more dread in the atmosphere in the background, and all that comes together perfectly in this set of songs. Again, I think I sold my vinyl of this because I was going for a bit of I sell all my records off, you know, and I was gutted to see it go. It is absolutely enormous. I may buy it again one day. It is literally like one of my favorite electronic music albums. It kicks like a fucking mule. And I cannot recommend this album enough. If you've never heard, Scorn is the perfect place to start. Does not mess about. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. This is my Scorn albums or studio albums ranked. If you like this and you haven't seen my original Scorn discography retrospective, and you can live with the fact it doesn't include the latest album because it came out literally a few months ago or whatever, then by all means go and check out my discography ranking video. It's a bit long, but that's the whole point. It doesn't, it's not a ranking video, I'm talking shit. It's just, it goes into like a history of the band and, you know, and my opinions on each record going through. It's not as, you know, this is a little bit shorter way of doing it and a different way of doing it. So yeah, stay tuned here on Lines in Wax if you want some more discography rankings of some artists. If you know, what do you think of this? Just let me know in the comments. If you've got any bands you want me to talk about, bands, projects, yada yada yada, anyone you want to recommend, just throw them at me. I'm all about learning about new music, and I'm all about getting in there and listening to some new stuff, and, you know, discovering the new music and all the rest of it. So yeah, keep it locked here. You know, like, subscribe, all that shit. If you want, if you don't, it's fine. I'm not, you know, YouTube whore. Take care of yourselves. I'll catch you in the next one. All the best.